And welcome back. The Center for Urban Future recently released a report showing that nearly 17% of working age New Yorkers with a disability were unemployed in the year 2021. Now, that high unemployment rate has persisted for much of the past 2 years, even as the unemployment rate for New Yorkers with a disability has fallen since the summer of 2020. Now, joining us now and sharing more details, we're pleased to have Eli Dvorkin, who is the Editorial and Policy Director of the Center for Urban Future, who breaks it down for us right now.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be back.
Listen, when we talk about these numbers, obviously a little bit concerning. And in particular, as I wanted to talk about, is that up from 7.4%, we're at 17%. Any particular reason why we can see these numbers continue to rise?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we've seen this time and again in times of economic crisis, where New Yorkers with disabilities are often the first to lose employment when the economy starts to shake, and they are frequently the last to be rehired, even as the economy picks back up. And unfortunately, we've seen this in the past. We saw this in the during the Great Recession. We saw this back in the 70s, and we're seeing it again today.
As you got to these numbers, you got these numbers after doing a report. And if you will, share a little bit with us about why you decided to do this report and what you were hoping to accomplish.
Well, thanks for that. I mean, first of all, we are in a city with nearly 1 million fellow residents who have a disability today. Having a disability in New York, this means we're talking about our neighbors, our friends, our colleagues, folks, in our buildings that we see in our communities every day. And this is an issue for so many New Yorkers because we are not operating at our full potential as a city, as an economy, if we're leaving New Yorkers with disabilities behind. So we saw this as a really urgent priority, not only as an equity issue. Almost over 2/3 of New Yorkers with disabilities are people of color, but we've seen that those unemployment statistics have disproportionately hurt folks who not only have disabilities but are also Black, Latinx as well. And we know that we need to do a lot better as a city to ensure that those employment opportunities that are coming back online as our economy recovers are able to reach those New Yorkers with disabilities who have been left out of the city's economic recovery so far.
And as you look now, you have these numbers. They're startling, of course, and very concerning. Where do you take the report and where do you go from here?
Well, I was struck by a couple of things in this research. One is that there's a huge opportunity right now. Despite, you're right, those numbers are really alarming. They should be concerning to policymakers across the city. But we also saw some real opportunities, some moments, some reasons for hope, frankly. The first one is that we're living through a sea change in how people live and work. The rise of remote work, hybrid work is here to stay. And some of the advocates that we spoke to said, we've been fighting for decades to see that kind of acceptance in our society for those kinds of work accommodations. Well, now over the past 2 years, they've become the norm. So that's a major opportunity. Now, it's not the only way that New Yorkers with disabilities want to participate in the workforce, but it's a huge shift that we should be capitalizing on right now. We're currently living through an incredible explosion of new technological innovations, things that were science fiction, frankly, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, that are now accessible to New Yorkers. Innovations in assistive technology that are able to help make so many more workplaces accessible, types of jobs, types of occupations, doable by folks with a variety of different disabilities. So that's creating the conditions for a major expansion of opportunity. And then at the same time, we're also seeing we have a really topsy-turvy labor market right now, but there's in fact a lot of hiring demand, unmet demand from businesses and especially small employers in particular. And if we could do more to help small businesses become accessible workplaces while connecting those businesses with organizations that are helping to prepare and train New Yorkers with disabilities for jobs in a variety of different sectors, we could see a lot more employment growth.
Share with me a little bit about New York City Mayor Eric Adams. I know you have an ask of him in the process because we know that he's the catalyst for a lot of this. He's got his hands full. But as you are petitioning the mayor, what would you like to see from the mayor's office?
Sure. Well, the first thing I'd say is we've seen that in general, funding for programs and services that support employment for New Yorkers with disabilities just hasn't kept pace with the need out there. I mean, the primary program, the city funded program that supports New Yorkers with intellectual and developmental disabilities in particular, has plunged 82%. That funding is down 82% after adjusting for inflation, over the past 20 years, from $70.7 million all the way down to $12.4 million. So that's a specific challenge that can be addressed with some additional funding. But it's more than just funding alone. It's really understanding how to leverage the system that we have today to be able to better expand employment opportunities for New Yorkers with disabilities. We have a couple of ideas from this research to do just that. One is we spoke with many different mainstream workforce development organizations out there, organizations focused on people with disabilities. What they told us was in most cases, they believe or they know that half or more of their clients are people with disabilities, but they just don't have the expertise, the training, the funding to be able to build accessibility into all of their programs and services. So we call on the mayor to create the first in the nation accessibility training challenge grant. This would be a new grant funded program to help workforce organizations build accessibility into their programs and services. And it would affect the entire workforce ecosystem in New York, not just those organizations that focus on serving New Yorkers with disabilities. But I will add, those organizations are incredibly important as well. As you can imagine, they're having real success helping New Yorkers access training, working with employers to cultivate inclusive workplaces, accessible workplaces. But generally speaking, all of those programs are operating at a really small scale, serving a few dozen people to maybe a couple hundred people a year at most. And they need a lot of support to scale up, as well as some real challenges accessing city funding, where most of those organizations that are specifically focused on serving New Yorkers with disabilities, helping them access employment opportunities, they're really not even competing for city contracts today because those contracts are just too inflexible and don't cover the kinds of they don't fund the kinds of intensive programming that those organizations see actually lead to success. So for most of them, the city dollars are 5% or less of their workforce programming, but that could change with some new support. And I think the mayor has recognized, he's spoken publicly about the need to support New Yorkers with disabilities. I think there's a real opportunity to make these kinds of investments in the years ahead.
Well, you have organizations out there that some may, have the mindset of wanting to do it, but I think you mentioned being able to scale up, to be able to do what they need to do to reach that mode of accommodation for persons with disabilities. What are some of the ways that an organization can actually scale up to meet the needs and embrace those with disabilities in the workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think most of the workforce organizations we talk to, I think it's understandable. They feel like they don't actually have the knowledge in house to be able to build accessibility into their services. So some of that is just around hiring needs. Organizations can't hire with the contracts that they compete for to deliver services. That's not enough to actually hire a whole new staff just focused on things like accessibility. To actually pay folks with disabilities with that expertise to come in and audit their programs and services and counsel them on how to make them more accessible. That's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there's a ton of work that needs to go into actually cultivating jobs in partnership with employers, educating employers that New Yorkers with disabilities are a incredibly powerful but untapped, in many cases, source of talent for their businesses. And then to be able to help those employers understand, here's how to make your workplace accessible. We have a recommendation in the report for the mayor to work with the Department of Small Business Services and the mayor's office for people with disabilities to launch a door-to-door business outreach team focused on actually working with small and mid-sized businesses to be able to implement those kinds of accessibility improvements, whether it's the physical design of their space or opportunities to integrate assistive technology so that they can actually hire more folks with disabilities to get the job done. So there's a lot of opportunity out there, but it requires that level of focus, investment, and really making sure that employers across New York City understand that there are real resources out there to be able to tap into the talent of our disabled population in New York. Such a diverse and wide-ranging population with so many skills and talents to bring to the table. And making that connection is a huge opportunity for New York, in a city where there are nearly 1 million residents with a disability, but where in the Bronx, for instance, at least prior to the pandemic, 70% of Bronx residents, working age Bronx residents with a disability, were not working in 2019. That number's only gotten worse between now and 2021. And it doesn't have to be that way. We see other cities that have made more of an investment in these areas are doing better. Seattle leads the nation right now. In Seattle, that number is only about 50%. Still, arguably alarmingly high, but major progress compared to New York. And we've calculated that if we were able to, in New York City, match Seattle's best in the nation rate, 51% labor force participation rate for New Yorkers with disabilities, and lower the unemployment rate to meet the citywide average here in New York, well, that would mean 72,000 more New Yorkers would be employed every year, earning over $3.4 billion in new wages. And imagine the effect of that influx of earnings on communities, on neighborhoods across the whole city.
Yeah. Eli, we got to leave it there, but certainly some great information to uncover, and hopefully we'll be able to see some progress. We'll definitely double back and find out more and see if there's any progress made in the near future. Eli Dvorkin, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
All righty, Eli Dvorkin, our guest. Now, if you want more information, we encourage you to visit the website. The website is nycfuture.org. And then, of course, follow them on Twitter at nycfuture. We do have more show. We encourage you don't go anywhere. Open continues coming up in a few.